There's a major difference between the Dungeons & Dragons games being played in D&D 5th edition and the kinds of games encouraged by the old-school Renaissance. Your average 5e game, and in fact most modern D&D games, are reactive. They are about reacting to a threat, an evil lich or a corrupt noble or something like that. They are entirely about restoring the status quo. They are about the status quo, in essence. What follows is essentially a 3-hour quip-fueled Marvel movie, stretched into a 6-month RPG campaign. At the end, nothing has really happened. Nothing has really changed. The story is right back to where it started, before the agitating event took place. This is what passes for a campaign. It is essentially a superhero story. But the superheroes do not actually do anything. They simply serve as enforcers of the status quo. Now, there's nothing wrong with this type of game, in essence, but ultimately it lacks what the old-school D&D games have, and something that certain groups desperately want to subvert or eliminate. Old-school games engage in domain play. When the characters reach a certain level, usually level 9, they become capable of becoming lords and ladies and ruling over and conquering land. They build castles, expand their domain, and leave behind a legacy for their offspring. They become more invested in the world. Now you could say that in D&D 5e, the same thing happens, with your rainbow-haired Tabaxi warlock having an intricate 38-page backstory. But that is all just contrived fiction. None of it came about organically through play. Most of the time, that backstory hardly matters at all. In fact, much of what happens in D&D 5e doesn't matter at all. The game has your character exist almost entirely independently of the world. No injury is too severe that a simple good night's sleep won't cure it. Even a wight's curse goes away on its own after a long rest. Your character's possessions or status in society hardly matters when they can wipe out an entire army by level 7 or 8. Why would they need to be part of the world at all? They are superheroic, above it all. Meanwhile, old-school role-playing games, for all their faults, of which there are many, support domain play. A system like D&D 5e allows domain play, but it does not support it. A game like D&D B/X or ACKS supports it. In domain play, the characters become invested in the world. The game becomes about growth and legacy rather than destruction. A reactive game is essentially nihilistic, where the characters only struggle to undo the effects of chaos and cruelty. There is no real greater meaning. In domain play, the characters build something. They expand territory. They settle land. They leave the world different from how they found it. A game like this gives the players real agency, a real chance to affect the world in a way that matters. And this is not okay in the minds of the globalist scum who want to destroy tabletop RPGs. They already hate them for being a hobby that doesn't require a $20 a month subscription to be exposed to interracial dating propaganda and general hedonistic degenerate Hollywood trash. You'll notice they have already tried to turn D&D 5e into a subscription service. That's why they hate old-school roleplay. They hate the ideals that it subconsciously advocates for. People today have been so brainwashed by nihilism. They have had their mating instincts suppressed so brutally that even something like a long-term old-school D&D campaign that involves the characters becoming real leaders in the world can be enough to reinvigorate their souls, especially something social that creates real brotherhood between the players and reminds them the importance of lineage and legacy and makes them believe in sovereignty and inheritance is very dangerous to the pod life that the freaks in Brussels and Stockholm want for us all. This may sound a bit too far, but it isn't. Domain play adds an entire other layer to the game that gives it a depth that an RPG, without it, can't really have. Now, there are games that are perfectly fine without such. Call of Cthulhu, for example, is inherently reactive, and it is one of the best role-playing games of all time. And there are many other examples, so this is not meant to a complete takedown of every game besides old-school D&D. And old-school D&D definitely has some flaws and shortcomings, and more than a few in the eyes of some. But that's not the point here. Even just reading old-school D&D game books, with their soulful European imagery and a mindset based on a cycle of life and growth, is a good antidote to the nihilism pushed by globalist corporatocracy. Yes, D&D is a game that has a lot of killing. Despite the boomers who say, combat is a fail state, combat is a fail state, endlessly over and over. They are retarded. But ultimately, death begets life. D&D is a game about conquering land from the evil and degenerate and putting it to good purposes. That is not a sin. That is not something to be ashamed. The entirety of modernist Western thought is based around guilt for your natural instincts to conquer, to build, to settle, to exploit. All of that is engaged by a large-scale strategy game, such as Civilization or Twilight Imperium or the like. But a domain-level tabletop RPG takes it to another level, allowing you to make the game your own, to customize it to yourself, to bond it to your own soul. The themes of this game are based around lineage. It is important to have an heir. This is shamed by modern society. You are supposed to adopt your wife's son. You are supposed to have multiple quote-unquote baby mamas or baby daddies. Or, better yet, just don't reproduce at all. Collect Funko Pops instead. Don't own land. Rent. The globalists hate the idea of the lower ranks of society owning anything. They want everything owned by corporations. You should fight against this mindset. And a tabletop role-playing game about a group of men gathering together to fight and conquer territory, rule over it, fortify it, settle it, make it agriculturally productive, and father heirs to rule over it after they are gone, is very, very dangerous to this anti-human mindset. Ironic for a group of people whose ideological forebears referred to themselves as humanists. You might say that this is taking such games too seriously. And to an extent, that may be true. But the number of nihilistic soy boys and quirk chungus girls who are on the verge of cutting out their reproductive organs, who see no reason not to throw away all their savings on DoorDash food delivered to them by third-worlders and rent their shitty studio apartment until they die, can be saved by these games. It has happened. It is subtle, but the shift in mindset that investing in a long-term domain-level tabletop RPG campaign produces is significant. It changes their mindset. They realize that the only thing that will matter after they die will be the continuation of their family name and the land that they pass on to their next of kin. That is the inherent human struggle. Their ancestral instincts will reawaken, at least slightly. And even aside from that, these games are so much more fulfilling, in most cases, than your average D&D 5e game that takes place in a cosmopolitan jungle where 30 different sexually incompatible races all live together for some reason, even though none of them can interbreed, and sell each other ramen noodles and coffee. That is basically a fantasy version of modern-day downtown San Diego. It isn't real. It's propped up by people that the authors of these books despise. It doesn't exist, and not just because it is fantasy. It is a world that does not make any sense at all. A fantasy world can be unrealistic, but still make sense. despite including dragons. These worlds are just utterly soulless because they are a shallow attempt to recreate the aesthetics of a soulless place in real life, a metropolitan melting pot. Your average D and D5E game is about exploring meaningless backstories, imitating Critical Role, engaging in combat that has no long-term consequences, and leaving behind nothing when the campaign is over but the happy thought that they defeated the big bad evil guy. This sort of reactive ethos has been pushed by fiction for a while now. Look at Harry Potter, a book series where the entire purpose is not to better the world, but merely to defeat the villain who is trying to destroy it. After the books are over, the main character joins the magical version of the FBI so he can continue to maintain the status quo. He improves nothing. He accomplishes nothing. He has no agency. At least he has children, unlike many young adult novel heroes. But modern D&D games don't even have that. The characters have no reason to get married, because that would just be plot bait for the DM to use the family members as hostages. They are all drifting, shiftless murder hobos. They do not create anything. They do not have any real impact on the world. That is why all the games are set in Forgotten Realms, where all of the real-world shaking events are precipitated by NPCs, and the hierarchy of power is already calcified entirely by Ed Greenwood's personal Mary Sue's. That is how they want you to enjoy D&D, not as a canvas to paint upon, but as a narrow labyrinth to writhe within, but never to escape. That is the constrictive reality that makes so many people bored of D&D, and the key to escaping that labyrinth is within the domain play. Whatever system you find to engage with it, it is far more rewarding than your average D&D campaign. It is far more fulfilling than your average D&D campaign. It can lead to a game that lasts years and years instead of months and feeds into the campaign after it, creating a rich history for your world that was produced organically instead of at the hands of some corporate entity. Far more rewarding than what most have today, wouldn't you say?